This is the last grant webinar that we will be hosting in regards to our community wildfire prevention grant program funded by Measure T. This will be a short one today again, but please, if you have any questions after, let's get them in the chat. Please keep your camera off to save some bandwidth and stay muted during the meeting. We're going to talk today about application submission and mapping. And part of that talk, obviously we'll talk about mapping. We're going to talk in depth about the CWPP and how that can help you with your application and the narration of your application. And then we'll talk about kind of a new system we have this year online with the application submission. So to start, project mapping is super important. Remember that the review committee team that we gather for these types to evaluate and rank projects are instructed to only consider what is in your application as part of the scoring process. And a map is one of the best ways to show information in a meaningful way. And so projects that involve vegetation management must have maps that show the project area in relation to the area around it. It should be at a scale that can provide some context to the review team. If your project does not involve vegetation management, if it's a educational project or like an early detection camera, wildfire preparedness project, you're looking at a map kind of with a general area in which the project will occur. Obviously, you won't have specific polygons showing treatment areas, but you still give us an idea of where this project's going to occur. And keep in mind, the geographic balance of projects is important to Truckee Fire. And so these maps are important, but it's not something that everybody has access to. People don't always have the skill set, first of all, or even the software to create maps. GIS software is incredibly expensive and complicated. And so if you're an applicant to this program and you don't have access to GIS software, we really don't want this requirement to hang anybody up. And so I am happy to make maps for anybody. And I've done this for the last few years. It's easy for me. It takes me a few minutes. It's not that hard for me. And so if you guys or anybody here that is applying and they're looking at the map requirements and there's no way for you to meet those requirements because you don't have the software, don't worry about it. Just reach out to me and we'll get you taken care of with a quick map that will serve the purposes of your grant. If you are an applicant that has GIS software, we would ask that you create your own maps and keep those shape files on hand for if you do get awarded a grant, then we will want those shape files for our own purposes. So this one's pretty light. Again, reach out to me. I'll make you a map. It's no problem. We can make changes to it. It doesn't need to be perfect. But I'm going to show you guys some resources to help you think about mapping and writing your application. Here's a map that I put together for a project that I did in Sierra Meadows. And this is as simple as we're looking for, right? It's at a scale at which I can tell where it is in the community. I'm showing the proposed project areas. And this is corroborated by my narrative, right? And so I'm using my narrative to justify my map and explain what I'm doing in these areas and what the treatments are, what the goals are, what the benefits are, everything we've talked about over the last 3 webinars. So if you haven't looked at those webinars or viewed them, they are recorded on the website. And so please go back and look through those. But it's very simple and shouldn't be something that someone gets hung up on. Moving into our Truckee CWPP, we talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but I did want to bring this back up because I do believe that this is one of your best resources to help you write your application and tell a good story. There's a ton of information in our CWPP, and let's run through that real quick. So we have a story map available to the public, and this is sort of the Cliff Notes version, if you will, high level information. If you haven't looked through this, please go to our website. If you're applying to this program, you should be familiar with the CWPP and what's in it, right? And there's a ton of information in here that can help you write your application and narration and tell a story. So as you scroll through this map, or this story map, we call them, there's a lot of information in here. We have a WUI map, and we define the wildland urban interface more as a intermix area. And so when you're describing your project, where are you in this WUI interface or intermix, right? Are you in the yellow zone, which we're calling an intermix? Or is your project in an orange area, which we're calling a defense zone? Or is it outside of that orange area in the red area, which we're calling a threat zone? And we have these legends available at the bottom here. So yellow is intermix, orange is defense, red is threat. These are things that can help you kind of tell your story. My project is located in the defense zone to the east of Glenshire. These helps, remember that these are people that are reviewing these projects, are professionals, and they're familiar with these concepts. We talk about vegetation and fuel models. This is high level. This is fairly nerdy information, but good information nonetheless. Where are you prioritizing your project? Is it in a forested area? Is it in more of a shrubland type ecosystem? Give us a picture of what your project is and where it's located and what's around it. We talk about fuels, fuel types. We talk about fire history, which is super important to, again, tell a good story. You can slide this slider bar here and you can zoom in to, say I'm trying to put together a project in Glenshire. I can see all the fires from 1908 to 2022. And some of these are old fires, 1926, 1978, the Polaris fire. Some of these have names, some of them are unnamed. Here's the Butterfield fire that happened a few years ago in 2022, right? So is your project within or proximate to a previous fire that has occurred historically? If it does, or if it's near it, it's probably a pretty good project, right? We want to think about the landscape and what's happened on the landscape and try to design our projects around that. We talk about, high level stuff here: frequent drought, suppression-based forest management, climate change has increased forest vulnerability to high severity, large scale wildfires. So there's a lot of info and text in here that you are welcome to take and work into your narrative. We keep going. We see, fire locations and starts by year. And so, long story short, you should be plugged into the CWPP to, when you're writing your application, to really understand the information that we've provided to the community. Here's another cool section. We have some SARAs, and these are broken down by community. SARAs are strategic areas, resources, and assets. So we talked about this landscape level context. What's around you? There's so much data we have in here. You can go at the community level. You can unclick. This is a dynamic interactive legend. So you can deselect things, select things, see where things are in relation to your project and talk about that. Do you have transmission lines? Do you have critical access roads near your project? Is there critical infrastructure? Do you have plantations near your project, right? These are all things that demonstrate landscape level context. This is an important map too. This is our risk assessment map. And risk, this is not a hazard map. Risk is the hazard plus the exposure and a susceptibility to that hazard. So the hazard is fire, and we are modeling risk relative to areas within our district, in our planning area. If you can expand this map and you can zoom in on an area and you can figure out what your risk is. Is it low, moderate, high, or extreme? Where is my project in relation to this risk? If I have a project out in a yellow area away from the community and something that's considered low hazard, I might want to rethink my project and try to develop something that is incorporating more moderate, high, and extreme areas of risk. And again, this is something that helps you tell your story and why your project is important to Truckee Fire or should be important to Truckee Fire. This is Truckee Fire's risk assessment map. This is for the community. And you should talk about, if I'm doing a project in Juniper Hill, man, all of Juniper Hill is pretty extreme risk. So I should probably be talking about that in my application. We break this down further by community, and we have lists of strategic areas and resources by community. So if I'm in the Donner Summit area and I want to view the SAR list within the community, we have these resources available to you. You can download them and we kind of list them for you. And so these are things that you can talk about. This is specific to Central Truckee, Donner Summit, East Truckee, and Tahoe Donner. Lots of information in here, and I'm moving through it very quickly because I can't spend a ton of time on this, but I think that everybody should be spending time in this story map. Lastly, we talked about this a little bit. We have this mitigation strategies. We have both completed, planned, and ongoing projects. So completed in green, ongoing in orange, planned in purple. Are you designing, is your project proximate to one of these areas where work has already occurred? Similarly, if you slide this scale bar over, you will see what we are calling the money map, the heat map, right? This is a prioritized landscape from a model showing high priority consensus areas to complete treatments. And this was completed as part of our CWPP using Vibrant Planet. If your project is in a gold area, we would consider that high priority. But if it's in any of the gold or green areas, we still consider that to be a good project as an area that we will consider a good project. So we have a lot of landscape covered here as high priority and total consensus. So it's likely that as you move through this, your project will be proximate to this or within. And you want to talk about that again. If I'm planning a project below Tahoe Donner in this area of gold, that is a high priority project, and you should be stating that. Per Truckee CWPP, this area is modeled as a high priority area from land tender model. So I know that was probably a lot of information, but I do really think that people should be reading this. And if you want even more information, there's actually a document that has all of this at even more detail. And so you can download the Truckee CWPP document. It's a large one. It's got a ton of information in it. I don't even know how many pages it is. Probably, 100 pages or so. But this is, these are resources available to you to help you with your narration. So I just wanted to cover that and make sure that was clear with everyone that we should be using the CWPP to our advantage with these grant programs. Again, we have a WUI map, a vegetation and fuel model map, fire history, fire starts, SARAs, which we call strategic areas, resources, and assets. We have a risk assessment map, all the community info you could gather, and we have mitigation strategies. So please use this resource to help you. It's for you. Okay, moving into the online application. This is new this year. The last few years, we've been doing kind of paper submissions, but this year the application must be submitted via the online application form. We will not accept hard copies or emailed copies. It needs to go through the online system. It must be submitted by 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Friday, May 2nd, and we will not accept any late submissions. So good practice is to submit your application usually 24 hours before the end of the solicitation period. You don't want to be doing this last minute. And we've mentioned this, it is strongly encouraged to download the workbook available at truckeefire.org/grants and use that workbook to draft your responses and to not lose your work. Here's how the online application, what's within the online application in kind of an outline format. And again, this is pretty consistent, or it is consistent with the procedural guide and those evaluation criteria within the procedural guide. And so this is what we're looking for, and let's run through this real quick. So this is the online application. You have to submit a project ID request form in order to receive the link to this application to your email. Once you submit that that project ID form, you will get an email back immediately with an option to set up a consultation with me. And then you will also get a link to this online application. So this is how it looks. You're going to have a project ID that's automatically assigned to you. So my ID, let's just say it's 01. I'm going to say this is a test project. And right away, we're looking for grant financials. So you should have an idea of what your budget is and what you're asking for. Maybe I'm asking for $100,000. I'm going to match $10,000 for a total of $110,000 grant. I'm going to give a brief project description. This is going to be the public-facing description of the project, so make that sound nice. And then we have contact information, and we have this broken up. So we have applicant, and so an applicant can be, again, a private non-industrial landowner, a local agency, Native American tribe, incorporated nonprofit, unincorporated nonprofit, or a privately held for-profit company. This is a dynamic application, and so if you're a private landowner, if you recall from the procedural guide, private non-industrial landowners are only eligible to apply for forest fuel reduction project categories. And so when you select this, some of those other prompts are going to go away for some other projects. It's going to be specific to forest fuel reduction projects. So say I'm a private non-industrial landowner, the applicant needs to be either the person who is going to basically sign the grant agreement if awarded. And so there's two different divisions here. There's an applicant and there's a project manager. The applicant you can also be the project manager, but in some cases we might want to have a Firewise community or a private landowner be the applicant for the purposes of being eligible for applying to the grant. But maybe I've hired a project manager. Say I've hired a registered professional forester to manage my project. I'm just gonna, RPF. We'll put my name, right? So that project manager is going to be the person that will have day-to-day responsibilities for the project, which will include reporting, invoicing to Truckee Fire, and coordinating with me on all things project related. The applicant doesn't necessarily have all those responsibilities, but they are the person that will be executing the grant agreement with Truckee Fire. So again, the applicant and the project manager can be the same person, but sometimes it might be different. So if you have any questions about that, talk to me and we can work that out. I'm just going to put some stuff in here to move forward. The address, right? And you'll see these asterisks are required. if you don't fill out the stuff with the asterisk next to it, it's not going to allow you to progress through the application. Okay, so once I have that information, oh, it's already asking me organization name. So it's going to kick you back if you don't fill something out. It's not going to let you progress. So we'll go next. What's my project start date? So all these projects are going to start on July 1st. Those are when agreements will be executed, 2025. And again, we want projects completed in the same fiscal year. So June 30th, 2026 would be our fiscal year. I selected applicant type that's only eligible for forest fuel reduction projects. So I'm not able to select anything else. If you selected a nonprofit organization or an agency, you would have other options for those other two buckets of community wildfire preparedness and community wildfire education. For this project details, we're looking for footprint acres. So footprint acres, if my project is 100 acres, that is the footprint. There's a confusion sometimes between activity acres and footprint acres. So we are only counting footprint acres for the purposes of this grant. Activity acres could be, in that 100 acres, I'm going to do 100 acres of chipping, 100 acres of thinning, and 100 acres of mastication. So really I have 300 acres of activity acres, but we're not going to double count acres like that for the purposes of our program. We just want the direct footprint acres, which is a direct correlation with your map. Scope of work. We've talked about this. It's going to prompt you. You have a limited word count. Again, you should maybe fill this out in your workbook before you fill this out. But this is your opportunity to enter in information about your scope of work. And again, look at the procedural guide for details and requirements and work through this. Collaboration, local support. Do I have any matching funds? Right? And then my attachments, my letters of support, my letters of commitment. What's my project readiness? Do I have a forester? Right? What's my environmental compliance? Attach it if I have it. So these are all, again, tied to the procedural guide and are very clear as to what we're looking for and the amount of points that are awarded for each section. So you're going to work through this. You're going to add all the attachments. You're going to select next, sign it, and you're going to submit it to Truckee Fire. Again, make sure you do this before the deadline. Don't wait till the end. So to wrap this up, again, the application is all online this year. We will not accept hard copies. If you're having problems with the online application, please reach out to us. It's new for us. So if there's bugs in the system, we want to know, and we'll address that. They are due by 5 p.m. on May 2nd. No late submissions. Do not wait until the last minute. Regular office hours and consultations will be available. I want to just mention again that there are other programs available to the community, including the Nevada County OES Microgrant Program. This is focused on hazardous vegetation removal along critical evacuation routes directed at fire-wise communities. The requirement is 1-to-1 match. They still haven't released the call for proposals yet, but keep your eye on this Nevada County OES Microgrant Program if you're in Nevada County. We also have other state cost share programs that if you're interested in, you should reach out to me and we can discuss. We do have 4 office hours available to you all to just plug in. I will be sitting here with the Zoom or the Teams meeting on, and anybody that chooses to show up and ask questions, you'll be here. I'll be here to answer those questions. If nobody shows up, I'll just be sitting in the room by myself, which is totally fine. Again, we have lots of resources available, the CWPP, the grant page. Reach out to us if you have questions. And again, I wanted to keep this short for everyone. It looks like we have some questions, and I'll let Brittany prompt those for me.
Yeah, hi everyone. Glad you all are here. We have a couple of questions for you, Dillon. One from Brian Foster regarding the project manager. He understood from previous webinars that a professional forester was required for fuel reduction projects. Is that correct? And if so, would the RPF be the project manager?
Yeah, that is correct, Brian. If you have any forest fuel reduction projects and you're a private landowner, you must have a registered professional forester. And that forester absolutely can be the project manager if that's something they're willing to do. That might come at an extra cost from the forester on their time. What we've seen, for example, a project we awarded last year in near the Juniper Hill, or within the Juniper Hill community, we had the private property owner was the project manager, and it worked out just fine. And that helps sometimes when you're willing to do that as a private property owner, because you can count that time as match. And so you can estimate the amount of time you're going to spend doing project management, call it 50 hours, and you multiply that by the going volunteer rate in California, which is somewhere around $32 an hour. And you can claim that as in-kind match. And so if you're struggling to find cash to bring to the project, maybe that's a good strategy for you, is to, yes, you still need to hire a forester, and you're going to have the forester do, all the contract administration, and that's what a forester does. They write the permit, they do the environmental compliance, they handle the contractor, but you as the private property owner are going to do the project management and the reporting to Truckee Fire, and that could count as potential in-kind match, which could help your competitiveness.
Thanks, Dillon. Can you go back to the office hour slide? I think that one, yeah, went by a little bit quickly. You can also find the office hour information and click into the office hours at truckeefire.org/grants. Well, I will put in the chat. We also had a question from Anne Rarick. I might have to ask you to unmute, Anne, because I'm not entirely sure which section you're asking about. But Anne asked, what should we put for this section if it's a community preparedness project?
Yeah, I meant the 3C, like the forest fuel reduction, the acreage. It says minimum of 5 acres, but if we're focusing on, community preparedness and education, we're not actually doing any forest reduction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, Anne, it's a dynamic application, and I selected forest fuels reduction, and that's why I got the acres there. So when you select community wildfire preparedness, that's going to go away. You're not going to have any acres to enter in. You're going to have a prompt to describe the deliverables of your project instead, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Will that then also under like project readiness with environmental compliance and the registered forester info, will that take that away?
Yes.
Or
yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep, it's all dynamic, and we set it up to hopefully make sense when you work through it, and those prompts will go away and you will not have to answer them.
Sorry, I've been working through like the application workbook that I downloaded. Will there be any different prompts to expect?
Well, that's just the thing. So the workbook has all of the prompts, and you'll see in there some of those prompts are not going to be asked if you select a certain project. So if you want, Anne, I can run you through that. But there are certain prompts in the workbook that you're not going to have to answer based on the dynamic questions that you answer in the actual online application workbook, and that should be clear.
Sure. I can always just once I'll request an ID and kind of work through it before submitting too.
Yep. Yeah. So you'll see in that workbook that it kind of breaks out what, let me see. Let me just look at it.
Like there's red stuff where it will say for any forest fuels reduction type. So I'm guessing that'll just be gone.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll see. Yeah. I mean, if you have any questions on it and if we can make it better, let us know. But for preparedness and education projects, your prompts are slightly different, but the prompts are the same. Just some of them are taken out to make sense for you, like the acres and the RPF requirement, but everything
Okay,
else mostly remains the same.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, environmental compliance also wouldn't be something you would need to worry about if it's a community education
Mhm.
grant type.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a couple more questions. What is the criteria for a project title to be called?
Be creative. Make a project name that describes your project in as few words as possible. It should be short and sweet. The East Truckee Community Wildfire Preparedness Project. I'm not here to name your projects for you. That's up to you.
We have a couple of questions from George. Is it possible to switch project owners, i.e., if the application is started with the homeowner on the application, but then after contracting with the forester, is it okay to switch?
Not sure I quite understand that question, George. If you want to unmute yourself and try to explain that. Switch project owners.
Oh, maybe I
not
may
sure
have
what you
chosen the
mean
wrong
by
word.
that.
The project manager, I guess I should have said. So you talked earlier about a forester being a possible project manager, but they would charge you more. You could also do it as the homeowner or the applicant. Can you switch project managers midstream if or do we actually have to contract with a project manager ahead of time?
No, we can be flexible with that, George. So once we have an agreement signed, if the project manager changes, we just need to be alerted to that and know who that we need to coordinate with. So
Fantastic.
no, it's not set in stone. We like to be flexible here.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of CEQA questions for you here, Dillon. Seems like CEQA is a big deal and difficult. I also recall that we should have CEQA done prior to applying for the grant. Any hints on how to accomplish this?
Yep, CEQA can be achieved in various different ways. CEQA is a big deal, and it is a nebulous, confusing process for sure, and it is difficult. You don't necessarily have to have the CEQA done, but one way to have CEQA completed is to work with a forester on a forest resiliency exemption. So a timber harvest plan exemption is functionally equivalent to CEQA, and that forester can have that packaged and ready to be submitted to the state, and you can clearly articulate that in the environmental compliance section. You can demonstrate your readiness. If you're going to a true CEQA pathway, I'm bleeding into Adrian's comment here on, it can't be completed before applying because Truckee Fire is lead agency. So yes, if you are asking Truckee Fire to be lead agency, first we need to have a conversation about that and make sure that we're all good and on the same page on the project and the timeline and what CEQA needs to, what documentation needs to be completed to meet Truckee Fire standards. But again, that's all stuff that you can talk about in your readiness section, and we try to be reasonable here. Like, these people reviewing these projects understand the limitations. These aren't people that have no idea about this world, right? They're foresters. They're people that get it. They know that CEQA is tough, and so as long as you can demonstrate that either the forester is ready to submit a permit or that you've discussed with Truckee Fire a plan to achieve CEQA with Truckee Fire being lead agency, and you provide a timeline, that is stuff that shows that you're ready and you're thinking about things the right way. And that makes the review committee feel good about awarding money if you at least have those plans in place. A lot of times foresters don't want to submit these THP exemptions, these timber harvest plan exemptions, because they're only good for 1 year. And so that's also fine to say in that section is like, we want to wait to submit this until we are guaranteed funding. And once we understand, or once we have a notice of intent to award or an agreement, we will submit this and we'll have compliance within 2 weeks, X amount of date. And so if there's anything specific, like getting the weeds with CEQA, I would suggest just giving me a phone call. I feel like I can get everybody confused really quickly when I start talking forester lingo and CEQA stuff. Just know there's lots of different ways to do it. That's why we want private property owners to work with a forester because a forester will be able to answer these questions for you and get you on the right path.
Alrighty, those were the only questions in the chat. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to raise your hand. I do see Adrian typing, so we'll hold on for a second. And Frances raised her hand.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering if you guys have any examples of letters of support and letters of commitment, and who I suppose the letters of support are from the homeowner's land. They're matching funds, and then the commitment. Oh no, that would be the commitment. The support would be other people in the community that support this. Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, I can provide templates and we can put those on the resources tab. I'll have Brittany write that as an action item for us to do on our grants page. Under resources, we will upload some templates for letters of support and letters of commitment. That's totally fine. And you were right, Francis. A letter of support is from the community at large. It's your neighbors. It's people that aren't what we call primary project partners, people that are not directly involved in the actual implementation of the project or having, they're just community members that support or agencies that support. So a letter of commitment is specific to people that are either providing matching funds and or are having work performed directly on their property in relation to the grant. So a commitment, letter of commitment is, we treat it as a legally binding thing. Like we incorporate that into the agreement and the contract with the fire district. And that's why we want those letters of commitment from every single landowner that is going to actually have work done on their property or are going to financially support the project, because we will hold people to what they say in the letter of commitment. A letter of support is much lighter. It can be from pretty much anybody.
So when we get these letters, do they get uploaded into this website too?
Yes, you should gather all of your letters, Francis, before you start the online application. You can save the online application halfway through if you don't have those yet, but you are uploading those attachments directly to the online application. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, another question from Adrian. Is it correct that the budget shows only things that take place after the date the agreement is signed by both parties? Anything between the application due date, May 2nd, and the agreement date is outside of the grant accounting. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. So yeah, it is. Yes, Adrian, you can only have reimbursable expenses or claim match within the performance period of the grant, which would be July 1st would be the earliest you could have any sort of expenses that you're reporting.
Great, thanks, Dillon. We do not have any additional questions in the chat, and I don't see anyone typing. So if we do have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand. Oh, George is typing. We'll give him a few seconds. Feel free to just unmute yourself. Oh, he just says thanks. Thanks for attending, George.
Okay, well, with that, please schedule a consultation with me. You can call me at any time. I'm here for you as a resource. And I appreciate the interest in this program. I think this has been some of the most well-attended workshops we've ever done since we started this program. So thank you all for your interest and enthusiasm towards this program and your willingness to work hard to get us some good projects. I look forward to seeing your projects, and I look forward to talking to you all more. And have a good evening.